Obviously, in order to successfully fight a war, you need to build weapons, and lots of them. While these weapons have the potential to do a great deal of harm, which is kind of the point during wartime, when whatever conflict for which they were originally built inevitably comes to an end, these weapons have the potential to become much more dangerous. There are places across the globe that are presently almost uninhabitable because of undetonated landmines and cluster bombs. Although work is underway to make these locations safe again, the job is a long way from being finished. What makes these cleanup operations even harder than you might expect is after being exposed to the elements for many years, explosives don't always operate in the way they were originally designed to. That, coupled with the fact that there isn't exactly an agreed upon map as where all of these explosives are, means that unless the operation is carried out very delicately, it has the potential to go seriously wrong. But what if there was a huge stockpile of slowly degrading explosives in close proximity to one of the world's major capital cities? A stockpile which, should anything go wrong, could result in the loss of hundreds of lives and cause incalculable damage. How would the people living in that city feel about it? Well, as you can probably guess by now, there does indeed exist such a stockpile, and in today's episode we're going to look at exactly where it is, how it came to be there, and perhaps more importantly, why it still remains there to this day. So join us as we discover the rather interesting story of the Richard Montgomery. Built in Florida during 1943 by the St. Johns River Shipbuilding Company of Jacksonville, the Richard Montgomery, named for Revolutionary War hero Brigadier General Richard Montgomery, was but one of about 2,700 almost identical ships. These ships, or Liberty ships as they became known, were constructed with only one purpose in mind, and that was to transport as much cargo as possible in order to assist in the war effort. In this, at least, the design was successful. According to the original designs, each of the Liberty ships was capable of carrying approximately 10,000 tons of cargo when fully loaded. Unfortunately, there was another problem, or rather, there were several problems. Due to the huge shipping losses brought about by German U-boat attacks, these vessels had to be built very quickly and as cheaply as possible. Initially, Liberty ships seemed to be fairly robust, given the financial and resource constraints placed upon the project, but it wasn't long before cracks began to show. Sadly, that last sentence was not figurative. The ships really were prone to cracking. During the war, steel was at something of a premium, and its use was severely rationed. Due to the fact that these ships were only ever meant to last for 3 or 4 years at most, the steel used in the construction of their hulls was, shall we say, not exactly of the finest quality. All metal reacts to temperature change, contracting and expanding as it heats and cools. Whilst this is less of a problem when working with quality materials, the poor quality steel became brittle when subjected to the freezing temperatures of the Atlantic, and this made it much more likely to crack. If the individual plates had been riveted together, then any cracks would have stopped as soon as they reached the edge of the plate. However, as a further cost-cutting measure, the plates on the Liberty ships were welded together, meaning that once a crack started, there was really no telling how far it might spread. In fact, at least 2 of these vessels suffered cracking that was so bad they ended up breaking into 2 pieces. So, if all of the ships were in some way flawed, why are we centering on the Richard Montgomery? And to answer that question, it's necessary to tell the story of her last voyage. In August of 1944, the Montgomery set sail from Pennsylvania as part of convoy HX-301. Packed into her hold was 6,250 tons of high explosives and detonators, which were being sent to aid the American Air Force fighting in France. However, before going to France, they first needed to stop off in the UK to join up with another munitions convoy. And this is where the problems began. Because the Montgomery sat slightly lower in the water than many other Liberty ships, along with the fact that it was carrying quite a heavy cargo, the berth that she was assigned at the Thames estuary was not in deep enough water. Assistant Harbour Master, Lieutenant Roger Foley, one of the few people in the story who seems to have possessed any degree of competence, realized that this might be a problem and argued vociferously with his superiors that the ship should be swapped with a less heavily loaded vessel that had been assigned a berth in deeper water. So adamant was he that the berth assigned to the Montgomery was a bad idea, he refused to issue the order unless he received it in writing from the Harbour Master. Instead of being heralded as the legend he undoubtedly was, he was demoted and moved to a different post on the grounds of insubordination. As it transpired, his superiors would have done well to listen to him, as on the 20th of August, during a Force 8 gale, the Montgomery escaped from her moorings and ran aground on a sandbank. As you can imagine, The situation only got worse after that, according to one report quoting, "As the tide ebbed, the ship's plates began to buckle and crack with penetratingly loud noises." Being fully aware of just exactly what was on board and just exactly what would happen in the event of a catastrophe, the crew, along with the captain, abandoned ship in favor of lodging elsewhere. At 3 a.m. on the following morning, the ship was inspected by a master stevedore who reported that although the ship had sustained damage, all of the holds were intact. In order to capitalize on this one piece of good fortune, a salvage operation was immediately launched. Initially, this was met with reasonable success, and about half of the deadly cargo was unloaded. Unfortunately, this good fortune would not last, and a few days later, the cracks would spread so far that the ship sank beneath the water. This, in and of itself, might not have completely ended the salvage operation. It may well have been possible for teams of experienced divers to continue unloading, albeit at a considerably slower pace. However, when the British Admiralty began to complain that non-military assistants were being paid danger money, they stopped assisting and the salvage effort was abandoned. From then until now, the ship, along with its deadly cargo, has remained pretty much untouched. Various branches of the government have carried out different types of surveys on the wreck in order to keep an eye on its deterioration, and in 1999 the rigging was removed from the protruding masts in order to lessen the stress on the structure, but that's about it. And now at this point you might well be thinking, it can't just be completely abandoned, surely there's some sort of exclusion zone around this ticking time bomb, right? And, well, yes, there is an exclusion zone, however, it does not appear to be very stringently enforced. During the 60s and early 70s, locals would often climb onto the exposed sections of the wreck in order to fish, and in 2007, a paddleboarder posted photographs online of him holding onto one of the masts. Furthermore, up until fairly recently, pleasure boats would offer paying tourists the opportunity to get dangerously close to this pile of unexploded bombs, simply because, as we all know, an excellent Instagram photo is far more important than the possible danger posed by thousands of tons of unexploded TNT. Now this leaves us with a couple of important questions. Just how dangerous is the wreck? And assuming that the answer is anything more than just a bit dangerous, why hasn't anything been done about it? With regards to that first question, opinions vary significantly. The UK government, on their information page about the Richard Montgomery, claims that, quote, "While the risk of a major explosion is believed to be remote, it is considered prudent to monitor the condition of the wreck. Surveys are carried out by the MCA on a regular basis to ensure that any changes to the wreck or its immediate environment are discovered quickly. It is clear from the results of these surveys that the hull is subject to the prevailing environmental conditions and is showing evidence of gradual deterioration. However, the wreck is considered to be in a stable condition." The quote ends. So, everything's okay, right? Well, maybe. Leaving aside the fact that this information has been provided to us by the very same government that has been collectively responsible for doing nothing about the problem for nearly 80 years, when in 1970 munitions experts at the Royal Military College of Science were asked to present a report as to exactly what might happen should all of the bombs on board explode simultaneously, they came up with the following. The results would be a 3,000-meter high column of water and debris and a 5-meter tsunami. The town and port of Sheerness, less than 2.5 kilometers away, would be overwhelmed. The water would also reach the petrochemical installations of the Isle of Grain, with possibly catastrophic consequences. The liquid natural gas containers have dimensions similar to that of the Royal Albert Hall, and they are surrounded by petroleum tanks. It is also possible that the wake would travel up the Thames and cause much of London to flood. The quote ends. Even if the gas storage facility remained undamaged, several experts have stated that the initial explosion would be the biggest non-nuclear detonation that the world has ever seen. Although we believe the actual amount of damage is probably somewhere between the official government, everything will be fine, and the almost biblical levels of destruction suggested in the report, it still seems utterly insane that nothing has been done to remove the problem. But why is that? Well, to put it simply, nobody really knows what to do. Although disposing of leftover World War II bombs is now a fairly routine process, it still contains an element of risk. Even when the job is carried out by professionals with years of experience, nearby homes and businesses are always evacuated just in case the worst should happen. When it comes to the Richard Montgomery, a case with so many unknown variables, nobody seems entirely sure whether the process of safely removing or detonating almost 1,500 tons of explosive material is even possible. With regards to a controlled detonation, we actually do have some idea as to how much damage might be caused. On the 22nd of July 1967, such an explosion was carried out on a different sunken munitions ship just off the coast of Folkestone in the UK. Although this ship contained less than a tenth of the explosives still on board the Richard Montgomery, the detonation left a 20-foot deep crater in the seabed, caused a tidal wave, resulted in serious damage to houses up to 4 miles away, and registered on the Richter scale. I think we can all agree the potential for an explosion 10 times greater makes the idea of a controlled detonation somewhat unthinkable. But what about engaging in the long, drawn-out process of defusing each bomb individually? Again, the problem here is the unknown. Although the ship has undergone regular surveys, there is simply no way of knowing just what state the explosives are in. Even if it were possible to remove each bomb individually, a process that could be theoretically carried out through the use of remote-controlled robots, one former British Army explosives expert that we spoke to told us that even moving one small explosive device could theoretically trigger an explosion. During a telephone call, he said, "The problem we have here is that until we can get down there safely and have a proper look around, we have no idea what state the munitions are in. Trouble is, you bump one of those things in the wrong way, and the whole lot could go up. It's not likely, but it's possible." So, is there anything in the works that might help to mitigate this danger? Well, yes, actually. However, these latest measures have been born out of necessity rather than any forward planning by those in charge. In 2022, when one of the regular surveys was carried out on the wreck, it was discovered that the deck plates were eroding more quickly than had previously been believed. This discovery presented yet another problem. These deck plates are the only thing preventing 3 large and heavy masts from falling into the cargo bay and potentially triggering the long-feared explosion. Initially, the government responded to this report with its usual "we'll do something about that at some point" attitude. However, about a year later, a more extensive survey revealed that time was up, and if something wasn't done, then it would be too late. The preliminary date for this work to begin is April of this year, 2024. Speaking to the Southend Echo in 2003, Lydia Hyde, Southend Labour councillor for St Lawrence Ward, said, "It is not going to be an easy challenge. It was something they hoped they could leave for some time, but the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency did a full inspection back in November. That found that degradation of the masts is more severe than they initially thought, so they need to take those masts down. It is one of those things. It's not like they would like to have to take the risks of having to remove them, but if one fell, that could cause a problem. They need to do it safely." Rather than being pleased that some action may at last be taken, she goes on to complain that the masts are a local landmark, and it will be a shame not to be able to see them anymore. Even if the masts are removed, it is still very much a plan that seeks to delay the inevitable. At some point, hopefully in the very near future, a much more extensive and above all permanent solution will be found. If this problem can't be solved, then there is a very real chance that the UK will experience a devastatingly catastrophic explosion, the likes of which has never been experienced anywhere in the world.